Let's get loud.
It's showtime, showtime, showtime. Let's go, Seattle fans. Where you at? How devoted are you? Time to get loud with your host, Native Seahawk.
C.
Oh, the life of a general manager in the NFL. Hello, my name is Aaron Thomas. I am the host, otherwise known as Native Seahawk, here for the Loud and Devoted. Yes, I as much as I'm thankful that I've accumulated some of the my master's degree program, etc., I don't know how John Schneider and the other general managers are able to do the work that they do, along with the capologists. But they're tough decisions, and they have to be made throughout the entire season. And now that we're getting into sort of the beginning of the off-season training activities, or OTAs, you have to have a competitive NFL roster, period. The questions are there. The season's over. Who do you keep? Free agency starts. Who do you sign? The draft begins. Who to choose? And so on Seattle, on May 4th, which is today, they find themselves in cap hell, basically. They are $250,000 in the black, just a little bit under the salary cap. And this year's cap, by the way, was a $255.4 million. And Seattle has pretty much spent all of it on players. Some teams don't do that, by the way. Some teams they don't spend all the way up to the very end of the dollars that are available. But how did Seattle find themselves here? It's almost like when you take a look at your bank account and you're going, what the heck happened? Where did I spend all this money? And you got to take a look at what Seattle is paying for this year so far, as we keep tabs on who's got what and who bought what around the VMAC. And Geno, our starting quarterback, takes up the most pie at 10% of the cap is going directly to one man. That's your starting quarterback. DK at just below 10% at 9% of the cap. Jamal Adams, who doesn't even play in Seattle, is taking up about 8% of that. Tyler Lockett and Dre Jones each at 7%, and Quandre Diggs, who's not even on the team, is 4% of the cap. So overall, $34 million or 13% of the total pie is to pay for guys, again, who are not on your roster. This is what's called dead cap. So 13%, ouch, that's a lot of money that you're not able to touch to be able to get any other free agents that you might want for the rest of the year. And there's a lot of really good ones out there, by the way, as of May 4th. So again, those three questions I asked: who do you keep? Who do you sign? And who do you choose in the draft? So who do you keep? Seattle is banking that Geno, DK, Tyler, and Draymond will have a very impactful season this year. That's what this cap is telling me. That all this money that they're putting towards it, between the three guys, Geno at 10%, 9% for DK, and 7% for Tyler, that's 26%. That's more than a quarter of your entire pie is going to those three guys. So you're hoping that as you're spending the money, you're putting the money down on that Lamborghini, that it's going to drive really, really well. And so that's what this is telling me. Now, they released Jamal Adams and gained $6 million in cap space, which was good. But overall, there were negative $14 million in effective cap space. So again, that was upside down. You probably could have kept Jamal Adams on the roster and not spent so much of the pie, but they were like, okay, we're going to pay to make sure he doesn't come back to the team. Now there's all these rumors about him coming back. I don't know if they do that. I have no idea what you even negotiate with somebody that's already got a ton of your money already. Do you just ask him to take the league minimum, which I highly doubt he's going to do? But they released Quandre Diggs, and they gained $11 million when they did that. But his effective cap space is at negative $3.2 million, because they were slightly in the black when they released him, gaining about $800,000. But then they went out and got his replacement, Rayshon Jenkins, at $4 million. So that's why he's at an upside down, negative 3.2. So again, these were the questions they had to ask themselves back in early March. Do you keep the guys? Do you re-sign them? Do you let them go? And in this case, both cases, they're in the red at about $17 million that they probably could have had they not done those moves. Now, who to sign in free agency? That's the second question. Seattle decided not to keep a few of the free agent players that they had on their roster, B-Wags, Jordan Brooks, Parkinson, and instead they opted to re-sign Leo Williams, thank God, and his 4% of the cap. So again, it was a pretty big chunk of change, but you had to do that. And most of his money, by the way, is going into the next few years. So they were able to allocate less money this year because they knew they'd be up against the cap. But they did pay more to replace B-Wags and Brooks by signing Dotson and Baker. They paid $2 million more to replace those two guys as the way that it all shook out, which is really, really weird because I know Brooks on an annual basis did get more money to go sign in Miami, but the way that his cap was able to be allocated for this year makes him less money to Miami on the cap than it does had he stayed in Seattle. So Seattle had to pay another $2 million. There's $19 million right there that could have went towards the cap had they done nothing but re-sign their guys, all four of those guys. So there you go. Now, who to draft? That's the third question. Draft capital is the single most important game chip that a general manager has that he gets to play. And he's trying to play those chips to get himself into the playoffs and build a legacy. Now, every team gets 7 total picks every single year. How you use those picks to either trade up and spend the picks or trade down and get more picks, or do you stick and pick like they did at number 16 this year? They could have traded up, but it would have took a bunch of draft capital to do that and for this year and probably next year's draft picks. Or could they have traded down, which a lot of folks are saying now, that Seattle had at least 4 teams that were trying to use their draft picks to go up and trade with Seattle to give us more picks? Or do you stick and pick? And that's what Seattle did. They stuck at 16 and picked up Byron Murphy, which was a great move. Now, also, which player you ultimately end up with in the draft that you hope to God he's a quality player and can be coached up to his potential. As we'll talk about later in this podcast, you can have way less cap space and still make the playoffs. How does that happen? Let me say that again. You can have way less cap space, way less pie, and still make the playoffs. But in order to do that, you have to draft correctly. That's part of the equation. So you might have been in cap hell like Seattle is now, but if you draft extremely well, then that means that you have quality rookies on the team and that you're relying upon to make plays consistently over the replacement that you got rid of. So in this case, you think about Seattle, if you got rid of a defensive tackle, which they didn't do, they're adding to the group. You're hoping that Byron Murphy plays better than the guy that he replaced. And so finally, the undrafted players can also play a huge a part of this discussion about how do you make the playoffs when you have a limited cap space. Seattle has had really good luck in the past. You think about Doug Baldwin, Angry Doug, or even Jake Bobo last year who flashed. Most undrafted players, however, do not make a big enough impact to help a team get to the playoffs. Normally they're depth pieces. They get on the practice squad. But you never know. You might have that diamond in the rough. So what was the biggest surprises this offseason so far? Seattle not trading or releasing Tyler Lockett. That was probably my number one surprise so far. Now, he's an aging wide receiver who, yes, means a lot to us Seahawk fans, right? But he's 7% of the pie. And, his contract, however, locks him into at least one more year because his contract is going to balloon significantly next year. And so the fact that he had not been traded or released, it didn't matter because this year Seattle would not see any cap savings for that. So you got to keep him. Plus, they were able to give him more cap space or give him some more guaranteed dollars this year to open up some cap space for this year. So it was a surprise, though. But I think the bigger surprise was that Seattle has not so far, as of May 4th, traded Dre Jones and his $4.8 million in cap savings had they traded him before June 1st. So Jones could not use Jones did and will use the benefit of a new system in Seattle with Coach Mike Mack. But with so much cap allocated to a part of the team that seems pretty rich, like the defensive line, they spent a ton of money bringing in Jones, bringing in Leo Williams. They had to spend a second round draft pick this year for Leo Williams. That it was kind of an interesting move that they didn't move Dre Jones before the draft. And so, but Jones still has tremendous upside that any team would want to give possibly a third round pick for him and take on his salary. However, this was the worst part of the team last year. We had so many gaping holes that just running backs were running right into and being able to gain significant yards. And it got better with Leo Williams, but at the end of the year, we hope that Mike Mack has more arsenal and Dre Jones will provide some of that. Him and Dirty will work really well with Dre Jones, and they could pay some pretty significant dividends if they really use him more effectively this year. So let's take a look at efficiency, right? Efficiency means that a team wins enough games to make the playoffs with the same allotted total money that everyone else has to spend. So you're just making those dollars work better for you. That's efficiency. So dead cap, or the money that is spent even though the general manager decided that their services are no longer needed, does count against that following year's cap space as well. That dead cap space is very inefficient. You're basically spending money for nothing. You're not getting anything out of that player this year. He's probably playing on another team because you let him go. So you want to be really, really low on the dead cap. But here are 10 teams going into last year's season. Let's take a look at the most dead cap teams that were going from 2022 into last year, and did they make the playoffs or not, and see what the kind of history, kind of the trends that we're seeing there. The number one most dead cap about a year ago was Tampa Bay. Believe it or not, they had 81 million in dead cap. And did they make the playoffs? Yes, they did. Why or how? Well, Baker Mayfield, their starting quarterback, had a lights out season, and he won himself a new contract. He was only $6.9 million against the cap. They also had an improved offense and improved defensive line, improved offense and defense, and they were able to coach them up. Los Angeles Rams, $79 million, just underneath Tampa Bay. Did they make the playoffs? Yes, they did. But they had a top 10 rookie class, and they only spent $6 million on that group of really good quality draft picks last year, and they made impact. You think about Puka Nacua and others that were drafted in Jones. They did such a great job for them, made such an impact. Arizona Cardinals had $69 million, number 3 most, and they did not make the playoffs. Green Bay, $67 million in dead cap space. Did they make the playoffs? Yes, they did. Mr. Love was only $12 million against the cap, had a lights out season, mostly in the second half of the season, but it got them enough into the playoffs. And they had a really good draft class. They only spent $5.5 million on that great draft class. Philadelphia was next, $63 million against the cap, against the dead cap. But they jumped out to a 10-1 season, mostly because they had sort of a really good benefit of a easier schedule. But then the second half, the last 5 games, they tanked it. They barely made the playoffs. The rest of the teams, Tennessee, Las Vegas, the Giants, and Indianapolis, did not make the playoffs. But that rounds out your top 10 most dead cap teams in going into last year. Now, that's 40%. That's 4 out of 10 of those teams who had the most dead cap still made the playoffs. Now, conversely, teams that were very efficient with their cap and this is how they fared. The teams that had the lowest dead cap, that means that majority of the guys that they were spending money on were still playing for them. The least dead cap space in 2023 last year was Cincinnati. They had a $4.4 million dead cap budget, which was really flipping good, but they did not make the playoffs. Why? Burrow went down with an injury. That's why. And that's all you have to say about Cincinnati. The next one, Buffalo, 10.1 million. They did make the playoffs. Jacksonville, 10.6 million. And their answer why they did not make the playoffs was they don't know. That's what they said. I don't know why we didn't make the playoffs. But it did, the coach, Doug Peterson, did say that it was because of him. It was poor coaching and poor execution. But the next 6 teams made the playoffs: Kansas City, Baltimore, Miami, Dallas, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and then there's the Seahawks. Yep, they had the 10th least dead cap space, and they did not make the playoffs. Bottom of the barrel defense, that's why they couldn't stop the run. They didn't have enough swag. That's kind of part of our brand. And they did have a tough schedule. Let's just keep it real. And they do play in a tough division, but all in all, they should have made the playoffs. But 7 out of 10 of these least dead cap space teams made the playoffs. That's significant. And it could have been 8 had Seattle won one more game. It would have been 8 out of the 10. So the most dead cap space. If the fact that only 40% of teams that had the most dead cap space still made the playoffs, let's take a look at this year. A year later? Who has the most dead cap space going into this offseason? Number 1, Minnesota, $57 million. Buffalo, $54 million. The Jets, $52 million. The Chargers, $51 million. And so Buffalo, I should have mentioned, even though they are on this list, they are definitely poised to be in the playoffs again this year. Green Bay was next at $46 million, and they will most likely make the playoffs as a most dead cap team. A lot of that's because of Aaron Rodgers. Carolina, $46 million. They're not projected to go. Tampa Bay's $40 million dead cap space this year. They're projected to go. Tennessee at $39 million. Philadelphia at $37 million. They're projected to go to the playoffs. And then you got Seattle rounding out the most dead cap space going in at $36 million in this offseason. So based on the last season, there's only one team that can make the playoffs and still have the most dead cap space. So again, when you take a look at all the different teams out there, that I think will definitely, Seattle's got a really low chance based on the fact that their dead cap space was so high and they didn't make the playoffs, even though they had one of the least amount. This year is going to be very difficult for them to make the playoffs this year. And so you take a look at the least dead cap teams going into this year. You got the Rams at $4 million, the Chiefs at 5.9, the Falcons at 6, Cincinnati at 6.5, Colts at 8.3, the Niners at 9.1, Baltimore at 12 million, the Bears 13 million, Denver at 14 million, and Arizona at 14. So based on last season, 3 more teams could make the playoffs of the least dead cap space teams. So how does Seattle or any other team that isn't named Buffalo, Tampa Bay, or let's even put the Jets in there, become the last team to buck the trend of more than 40% of teams who had the most dead cap make the playoffs? How are they going to do that? The odds are so against them. And so it will have to heavily rely on a few things. Number 1, they've got a new regime. They've got a new direction, a new head coach, and they've got a lot of young guys to coach up. Now, speaking of the young guys, it's younger players that needs to have a better overall performance of the team to make the performance go up. Guys like defensive back Devin Witherspoon, defensive tackle Byron Murphy. I know he's just a rookie, but they're going to really need him to succeed. Offensive line, the new guy Christian Haynes, our new center Oluolu, wide receiver Njigba Smith, and running back K9. These guys are going to have a lights out season this year. That's the way that the other teams who had the most cap space, how they were able to get in was they had a group of young first and second year players that just picked it up, and they were able to be consistent and make some heavy plays consistently throughout the year. They will need all of this and to be more impactful to the team at key moments to have a chance to get in the playoffs. Finally, Seattle's core guys will need to have more impact and stay as healthy as they can be more than ever in order for this to work. Quarterback Geno Smith, it starts with him. he's got to do better with his accuracy. Wide receiver DK, tackles Abe Lucas needs to just stay healthy. Charles Cross, defensive end Nwasu and Mafe are going to have a lights out season on the edges. Defensive tackle Leo Williams, you spent all that money to get him back in, and defensive back Reek Woolen, who had a step back in 2023. Those core guys are going to have to step it up in order for them to make up for that dead cap space. Now, if Seattle can have a great schedule, meaning, basically having that bye week be later in the season, not like the fourth week like it was in 2023, they're going to have a tough schedule this year. They play the AFC East. You've got Miami and Buffalo, who are both slated to be in the playoffs. The Jets are sort of right there, possibly getting in. Patriots are still rebuilding. You got the NFC North. You got the Lions, the Packers, and the Bears. Those 3 out of the 4 teams are actually scheduled to be predicted to go far and possibly make the playoffs. Even the Bears, which I don't know if I buy that one, but they're going to be a lot more tough to play than they've been in the past. And of course, you got the NFC West. You got the Rams, the Niners, and the Cardinals twice. This will be a tough season filled with potential playoff teams hungry to get back to the tournament. And so what could Seattle do to help alleviate cap space going forward? You're basically $250,000 above the cap. Seattle could cut if they wanted to. Jaron Reed, defensive tackle, and that would release $4.8 million right there. Darrell Taylor, the edge rusher, former second-round pick of the Seahawks. If they do that, they'll release $3.1 million. Michael Jackson, $3.1 million released. John Radigan, $2.9 million. Stone Forsythe, then his backup is $1 million if you cut him, and then Cody White, which is a very, very backup in the wide receiver room, $900,000 savings. So if they cut all of these players, they would open up about $16 million, or half of them, I think, if you were to go that route, would be about $8 million in cap relief. But this is what I think is going to happen, and I hate to see any of the guys go, but I could see them releasing Darrell Taylor, Michael Jackson, and Radigan, which would open up about $9 million in cap space. So that's what I think they're going to have to do. They got to make room for the draft picks monies. They're going to have to have some money available for injuries in case a key player goes down, or a key one of the both tackles go down. You got to go find yourself some new depth. So you got to take some money to do that under the cap. But again, that cap space, you guys, that dead cap space is what's really going to be a hindrance this year. And like I showed before, I mean, it's only 40% of those top 10 with the most dead cap made the playoffs. 40%, that's it. And right now, there's only 3 teams that I think are going to make it: Green Bay, Tampa Bay, and Philadelphia. There's maybe room for one more. Buffalo will probably get in. How do you beat them? I don't know. They've got a really solid defense, and they don't have Stephon Diggs anymore, but they've got some good replacements there. And I don't know. It's going to be really tough for Seattle to make the playoffs, is what I'm saying. But again, if those rookies come out lights out and they just totally spark this team, who knows what could happen going forward. So although what I have to say today is very bleak, I'm very positive in the fact that Seattle is going to be a fun team to watch. We'll see what Coach Mike Mack has up his sleeves to try to do what he can as they try to alleviate this really pain point that they have, this dead cap that, like I said, teams have made it in the playoffs before with all that dead cap. They could do it. It's very possible. It's just going to be a lot more hard to get in. Next year, the good news is that dead cap space is a lot less. Now, if they make some move this year to add on to next year's dead cap, then that's going to be tough. But again, it's just money that you could have used to go after other free agents that could possibly tip the scales into your favor, a specialty receiver, or somebody that's just really good at what they do. Maybe it's kickoff returns. That's all they do, is do that very well to get you some really good field position. That kind of thing is what free agency does. Especially if, God forbid, Geno goes down. If you don't have a very good quarterback depth room, then you're really sunk for the year anyway. So we'll see how it goes. Thank you for joining me on the Loud and Devoted. Native Seahawk here signing off. Have a great rest of your day and go Hawks.